This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, welcome to the show. I'm very pleased to bring you another installment of the Chronicles of Filth. This time I have reached out to band photographer Mark Beuchet for a chat. He photographed the band from around 1991 or 1992 to 1994. He provides insights into his collaboration with the group, and I discuss how he, along with Chris Bell and Nigel Wingrove, differentiated the band's imagery from prevalent trends of the time. So, here he is, photographer Mark Beuchet. First and foremost, thanks very much for agreeing to do this. It's appreciated.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm not surprised that my request came from out of the blue. I accept the mantle, but it's been bestowed on me as being something of a biographer of the Cradle of Filth story throughout the 1990s. So I've had conversations with just about all of the members that you photographed back in the day, and then some, because God knows how many people have been in that band since. There's been
I know.
a lot.
I know. I was hoping you weren't going to quiz me on anything like that, because every time I photographed them, there was different people in the band. I mean, obviously Dani was the main, the main man, the only constant, I suppose. But yeah.
Well, let's start there then. Every time you photographed them, there was a different lineup. So when were you first introduced to the group?
Right, okay. Well, the story with that is that because I played in a band called Annihilated in the 1980s, right? So a thrash metal band. And when I'd packed that in, I worked at this photographic studio, which was a family thing. And just down the road from me was a music shop. So I would go in there and buy all my guitar bits and everything. And I met a young guy called Paul Ryan, who worked in there. Might have heard of him.
Of course.
And so obviously we got chatting, and he showed me their first demo and gave me a copy of it. And I said, tell you what, if you want any, you could do with some decent pictures being taken, I'll do some for you for free. And then when you become famous, you can pay me at some point. And so that's how it happened. So I had only met Paul through working in the music shop. And they took me up on it, and they came down to the studio, and I did a photo shoot that they used on that second demo. So not the first one, but the second demo.
Okay.
And I think it was a picture where they were lying on their backs, looking up. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't. My intrigue, of course, is surrounding it's called the Sadovania picture.
Right.
Or the photograph of the band. It was used on the back of a T-shirt with the iconography Sadovania underneath. Okay. And
right.
It's probably one of the more, I would say, with your photo on the back, and with Chris Bell and Nigel Wingrove's photography and art direction on the front with the Nicole Kidman lookalike, it's probably the holy grail of Cradle of Filth T-shirts.
Right.
Because
cool. I never even seen it before, and until you said, I hadn't ever seen that T-shirt.
Yeah, I'll share screen for a moment so that you know exactly which one that I'm talking about. I've just got to work out how to do it. Yeah, of course, I had it happening before, but now it won't let me do it for some reason. Let me share screen. No, there it is, right there, flashing at me in green. Okay, here we go.
I think I know which one it is, though.
Yeah, there we go. There it is there. So I don't know whether I can enlarge this image here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So that's the front. So that's Nigel and Chris Bell. And then yours is on the back. Iconic.
Cool. Yeah, I remember it.
There it is there. Yep. Yep.
I remember it, and I remember how it came about, because we'd done other similar shots in my main studio, and they were out there on the internet as well, and I think that they were used on something or other. I can't remember what, but I know there's some more sort of nice ones in colour with a different background. And because the top floor of my studio was derelict, and part of the ceiling was coming down, and it was in a state, and there was all bits of brick dust and everything all over the floor. And I said, we could do a picture up there. That would look really good. and of course they had all this blood and everything. So because we were going to be doing the place up anyway, we just splattered it all up the walls. So behind them was blood splattered up all the walls and everything. And of course I didn't care about it going all over the floor and making a mess everywhere, which is why it's such a sort of intense picture, I suppose, because they genuinely were chucking this stuff about and didn't care.
So what about the direction, in terms of any artistic direction, the way that they're posing and the like? Did you have to give them any instructions, or is that all them?
Well, I would have done, obviously what they wore and how they looked was completely them. And probably me and Dani would have probably had some discussions about where people would be in posing. But yeah, posing and lighting would have been me. But, you know, we didn't really, I don't think there was a huge amount of discussion. I think as time went on, Dani became more and more aware of how he wanted things to look. But I think in the early days, maybe not quite so much, but he was definitely the only one who kind of had, as far as I remember, who had much input on anything, because he's obviously quite aware of how things look, isn't he? So, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, so there was some other photos of yours that were used a bit later on. I think it was in an album I tuned out by this point, but I think it was Love, Hearts and Witchcraft. Or sorry, I'm going to make it name of the album, but yeah.
I think that was at a point where were they moving on record label or something like that? I think they'd changed, and this was years and years later, wasn't it? And I had a phone call from their record company just asking permission to use one of the pictures, I think. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, because I'd played in bands and that, and I know how photographers can sometimes be about like copyright and use of images and all that. So I'd always said to them right from the start, you do whatever you want, you know, do what you like. So obviously they were free to do T-shirts and do things. They didn't have to get permission off me or anything like that. Yeah, so it was only like the record label obviously asked me if they could use that one because it was later on, you know. But I didn't have a problem.
So effectively, you're just being a good bloke about things and taking these cool photographs that have since become iconic.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah. I mean, I treat people like you want to be treated yourself, don't you? And there's so many stories out there of photographers sort of holding people to ransom over images because of the copyright laws.
Yeah, it's terrible.
You know, because if you take the photograph, you own the copyright, and you can say to people, well, you can only use it for this. If you want to use it for something else, you have to pay extra and that's not me at all. You know, they're a band. They were just, you know, and that was early days as well anyway. And I was just pleased to do something for them. And obviously I did the first sessions for free. And then obviously once they started getting some money, they did actually pay me for the subsequent sessions, you know, and they didn't have to come back to me. They were a good bunch of guys.
So you were primarily dealing with Paul, and then Paul exited the band not long after, actually. It was Principle of Evil Made Flesh across that album in 94 or thereabouts. And you kept on, your relationship then switched to, say, with Dani, did it, or one of the other members? Yeah,
it did. Yeah, well, because when they first came in, it was clear that Dani was the one, you know, the driving force behind the band anyway. But yeah, so I think once Paul had left and Dani just came in, I was kind of surprised that he still came in. So he must have liked the pictures. You know, and I always got on with him well. I like Dani, nice bloke. I saw him, bumped into him a few years ago, actually, in a club in Ipswich, and he still remembered me.
There you go. Okay, yeah. Well, your photographs did something else that you're not aware of this, so I appreciate that, but at a time when just about all black metal bands were focused on being maudlin corpses in Arctic woods, and that imagery was all the rage around 1994. You're even just particularly that Sadovania pic, that gave Cradle of Filth a very distinct look compared to all of the other bands of the era. Because for starters, you could actually see the band. They weren't really hidden behind trees or the other stuff, the tropes that were going on at the time. You could actually make out who the band members were, and even beyond that, the guys, you probably are aware of this, but they had regular names. They didn't change their names to, you know, Lord of Death and these ridiculous names that 19-year-olds can come up with when they've had had a few tins and God knows whatever else, they actually kept their real names as well. So the fact that you could identify the band really gave them, I believe, an edge. So you must be, yourself, Chris and Nigel really should be given credit for doing that for Cradle. And then after that, you saw a lot of bands really going down that route.
Right, okay. Well, like I said before, I didn't really sort of follow their progress particularly, because when I first met them, it was just another local band starting out. Thought I saw some pictures that they'd taken, and I said, do you want me to do some for you? I've got a studio down the road, do it for free. So I didn't really kind of follow the progress of what happened, or I kind of got out because obviously I was into metal and everything anyway, and still am. But at that point, I kind of lost touch with what was happening anyway, so I didn't really follow what they were doing. So I've been pretty unaware, living under a rock. This cat wants to
we
get,
all move on.
Really high.
You're right. Yeah.
The shoulder cat.
Look at that. Yeah. Look at that. Oh, she knows who Dad is.
I'll let her do the interview. Yeah, she's all in black, dressed for the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Gosh, got claws in my shoulder though.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. As I say, I can definitely. My cats roam around here constantly when I'm talking to people. I even see people making comments with some of the videos that I post, the interviews that I post, and they talk about the cat walking around behind me. So there you go. So no, I can definitely understand. But
yeah, I don't know why she's wanting to get on my shoulder like this. Maybe it's because I'm talking and she thinks I'm talking to her.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Oh well. How old is she?
Maybe she's just really into Cradle of Filth. I don't know.
Well, the era that we're talking about, who can blame her?
Yeah.
Look, just for some context, I tuned out around about 1999, year 2000 of the group, and the photographs after that they go from the sublime to the ridiculous. The Marilyn Manson thing by then had really taken over. So there were bands like Covenant and Cradle. It wasn't just those two bands, but a lot of bands started going down that ridiculous Marilyn Manson pathway where it was very androgynous and wasn't about corpse paint. It was about makeup and very high contrast lighting. Photoshop started to become the norm and pretty much during. And it started to take away from the magic which your images capture so beautifully and
well. Yeah, I mean, obviously, at that time, we didn't have Photoshop, did we? It was all shot on medium format film. Oh, she's got her claws right in me now. So it would have been all shot probably on, if you know anything about old cameras, Mamiya 645, which is a medium format camera where you had 15 pictures on a roll.
Okay.
So you had to kind of try and make the most of each picture. Because you didn't just fire off hundreds and hundreds like you do now with digital cameras. You only had a roll of 15, and you had to be aware of what it was costing you to take the pictures.
I bet.
So that's probably why there wasn't quite. You didn't take as many. You had to get the posing and everything right, and then take that shot. But one interesting little story I have got about that picture with the blood up the walls and everything. I appreciate you can't see that in black and white, but it was quite amazing, all this blood splattered up the walls. When I eventually got around to redoing that room, because I told you part of the ceiling was coming down at the time that we took those pictures, it was replastered, right? And the blood came back through the plaster.
Wow. There you go.
And then my wife came in and helped paint it, and we painted it all white. The blood seeped through, and we had to keep coating it to get rid of all the blood because it came through pink, and we had all these pink lines all up the walls and everything from where we'd all splattered blood up the walls.
Yeah, bit of an artifact for you.
So it probably cost me more in paint and time painting it than I got paid for doing the picture.
Yeah. Can you recall how many photographic sessions were with the band?
Probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or something like that, because there was one time when I did a load of sort of head shots and it's inside one of the albums. I can't remember. Is it? I think it might be. I did have it written down somewhere. Principle of Evil Made Flesh.
They're yours.
When you open it up, there's some headshots, isn't there?
Wow.
And I did those ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they did very similar ones on later albums, which I didn't do. But they'd obviously done them, and they looked like they'd been more kind of manipulated and that, whereas mine were, you had to light it there and then. There was no change in it in Photoshop because it was on film. And I did all my own processing and printing as well, you see. So I printed all the originals and that. And also one of those pictures taken at that session was used on a promo card. It was on Cacophonous Records, and they made an A4 promo card of it, which I did have, but I don't know what I've done with it.
Okay, right, yeah. So you were right in there with Principle of Evil Made Flesh. So the band images are all yours.
The ones inside, the headshots, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to bring one up so that I can show one to you. Inside, I'll just try and go inside.
So I'm assuming they must have said to me that they wanted headshots, individual headshots, because otherwise I wouldn't have shot them individually, I don't think. So it must have come from Dani. But obviously I've done the lighting and the black background and stuff like that. Because like I say, there's no Photoshop. You've got to light it and shoot it as it's going to end up being,
Yeah. What about this one here? Is this one here yours?
It might be. I recognise them all.
Yeah.
It might well be, yeah.
Looks like it could be, yeah. I mean, this is back when they were really going for that Norwegian look, but still.
Yeah, what year was that, do you know?
I would say it's about 93 or 94, maybe 1993 from the looks of that, because the lineup was similar across both years, but I'm just going by the colour of the hair and that you can see Paul there to the left. You can see him behind there. Yeah. So I reckon that's yours.
Yeah, it probably is, yeah. Yeah, I would have thought so, because it was only because I think, did they sign for Sony?
Eventually.
And I think it was kind of at that point that, obviously there was more money involved and everything, and they probably didn't want little old me. And they kind of went up in the world, which is fine. You've got to move on and have different things, haven't you? And I was limited on what I could do, because our studio was more, to be honest, we did like weddings and portraits and commercial work and stuff like that. And I did bands from time to time, because I did Beuchet. You heard of Beuchet?
Of course. Yeah, great band. Yeah.
Yeah, I photographed them. Because I think they were with Cacophonous Records, I think, at one point.
Well. Yep.
Yeah, and they sent them all the way down from Sheffield for me to do a picture, and they had all the swords and everything, and that was good. They were really nice guys as well.
Well, that's the question then, isn't it? Due to the success of the photography with Cradle of Filth and now I know about Beuchet, did any other bands reach out to you?
No, because what you've got to remember is, at that point, we didn't have the internet, and it probably wasn't until later that the photographs were more appreciated. So I never advertised myself as a band photographer, because I was more of a printer. That was my day-to-day job, was just black and white printing for magazines and stuff like that. And I just did the band thing just, mostly as a favour to people I knew who were in bands. So I did a few other bands, but they're all local people who I met through the scene, Of course, these days it would be very different, wouldn't it? Because everybody's on the internet and they would know that I took the pictures, and if they liked them, they would have come to me. But of course, back then, my name might have been on there, but I don't think there was any contact details or phone number. People wouldn't have known how to get me. You couldn't look me up on Google, could you?
Yeah.
So no, maybe I could have made a living out of it, and I'd have a fortune. Who knows?
Yeah, well, it was. Yeah, of course, the internet is completely revolutionised everything, but it's been here so long now, 25 years or so. We've had this version of the internet that we're all so used to now. Certainly since about the 20th century, I'd probably argue 1999, year 2000, you can almost find anything. But yours was 5 years before that, 1994, 1995. So yeah, you're right. It predates it. And how do you know if you
Well,
don't?
I mean, yeah, because I mean, their first. It must have been when I met Paul in Sounds Plus. It must have been about 1992, because I left my previous band Annihilated in 1990, and then we had like a sort of indie pop rock band called Love Lies Bleeding between sort of 1992 and 1995. So it must have been about 1992 that I met him, because it was just after they'd done their first demo. Because obviously he gave me a copy of it. And I'm totally honest, I didn't like it. But, it was just that bit further on. That's probably where us doing thrash metal in the 80s had run out of steam and it had moved on, hadn't it? And I didn't kind of go with that at all. Sorry, cat troubles again. It's got to claw everything.
Yeah, I know. I got to yell at mine too when they do the same thing.
Yeah. So that was kind of it, really. I mean, like I say, I thought Paul's a really nice guy. I haven't seen him probably since those days, because I think he went off to uni or something, didn't he? He left the band and decided to go to uni or something, I think.
Is that right? Right. I'm not completely sure. I caught up with him a couple of years ago, and he and his brother just struck me as very fine individuals. Very successful.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I really like Paul. He's a really, really nice guy. And I think once he'd left Sounds Plus and he left the band, I just never ever saw him again. I've never seen him again since. Obviously Dani, very, very rarely see him. And the only other one that I sort of knew was Robin.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because a bit of a tenuous link, but our band Annihilated, our singer, when we kind of split up and that, our singer formed a band with Robin and with my current singer, Rob Durrant, called Nightbreed. Okay,
there you go.
Right, so that was probably just before Cradle of Filth, so that must have been around the sort of 1990, 1991. Then I guess that they split up and Robin went and joined Cradle of Filth at some point after that. But yeah, I mean, they were always, whenever they came in, I'd say particularly Dani, he's a guy who would come in, he was quite businesslike, he would shake your hand, but he's genuinely nice guy. They're nice, decent people. They weren't, they weren't up themselves or anything like that. But they're all good people.
That's the impression that I've formed over many conversations and even taking things offline. And it seems to be the case with anybody that's ever been in the band, actually, despite the inner turmoil and some of the other things that have gone on. But on an individual basis, I can assure anybody that they're all, and people know I've shared this opinion a lot, but they're all the sort of blokes you'd be happy to have in your house. And I can tell you that's not true for everybody I've interviewed. I can
no, I know, yeah. Well, ultimately, because I did the pictures, like I said, first time round was a freebie as a sort of favour, just to help out a band starting up. If I didn't like them, I wouldn't have photographed them again.
Yeah.
If they weren't decent people. Because you can have a laugh, and they did have a laugh, don't get me wrong. They all had a really, really good laugh, good sense of humour and everything. But nothing, nothing that you wouldn't be happy with and be able to join in with and that,
Yeah.
So, yeah, all good people. I've always kind of had that attitude, though. If if I'm photographing people and they're not nice for whatever reason, or they're rude or obnoxious or something, even if they're paying, I'm not photographing them again.
I'm
exactly it wouldn't matter, a matter of principle. Yeah. So the fact they kept coming back and,
Yeah, Rob's an interesting one. I even speak to people that were in the band with him for Sarah, who really should have been in those photos, I might add, but wasn't. I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of why Sarah wasn't more a permanent member of the band, given that she was such an integral part of the live presentation of the outfit, and indeed a lot of the recordings as well. But she shared with me that she hasn't spoken to Rob in decades, and she was very good friends with him. So Rob seems to have, and quite intentionally, does not want to be contacted, I must say, at this point. I've gotten close a couple of times, but I'm always very Very respectful of people's privacy, insofar as no doubt he's got a family now and wants to lead his own life and might just want to have it in the rearview mirror. But it's just a shame because he's somebody that people really would love to hear from.
Yeah, I haven't seen him a long time either, but I'm sure that a few years back somebody shared something with me that he had done and that he'd been working on music. So I don't know whether that's true, whether I'm misremembering that. But I'm sure somebody was talking to me about it and said he'd been doing some stuff and it was really, really good. But
yeah, well, he and John or Gian, depending on who you, it's John is what he was known as within the band, but it was always stylized as Gian, always known as Gian.
Okay.
Liner notes. But do you remember much about him, the red-headed guy?
I do remember him. All I can remember is he was also, when he came in, assuming we're talking about the same person, bit of a beard and that.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. I do remember that he was a person who had some ideas and that and input into it, because some of them just kind of, they come in, they go along with it because Dani, as you know, we've talked about what we're going to do and kind of planned it out and had some ideas and everything. And it's obviously Dani who's kind of, you know, the one doing that. Mm-hmm. But I do remember him, you know, being somebody who chipped in with some thoughts about ways of doing things at some point, because I don't really think anybody else ever did. I think everybody else just kind of went with the flow and we just did what we we're going to do, you know.
Well, that's interesting to say the least. Yeah, because there's always that perception that Dani is the one at the centre controlling. Musically, it's a different story. He needs the guitarists and the musicians for that, and the lyrics and the imagery. People misunderstand my perspective on that. It's not that I don't think he hasn't had a lot to contribute to the band. He's clearly been the driving force, but he's not the musician that crafts the music and therefore writes the music, but he does control and has been responsible for. And your commentary has confirmed it, that way back since the very genesis of the band, he's chiefly responsible for the public presentation.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What about Stuart and Nick? Do you remember them?
Yeah, I know. Well, was Nick the drummer?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I just seem to remember. Yeah, nothing kind of stood out particularly. I mean, you know, obviously everybody had a joke and a laugh and stuff like that. I don't particularly remember them kind of contributing ideas or suggestions or anything like that. Really, I think they were just people who kind of went along with it as far as the photographs go. You've also got to remember that although we're all sort of people who played in bands and you have photographs taken and videos done and stuff like that, most or a lot of people actually don't like having their picture taken and can feel subconscious about it. Yep. So sometimes they can act a little bit differently to what they might do otherwise. So people who might be loud and have stuff to say on one hand will go into a photographic studio and they've got lights and camera and everything on them, and they'll go quiet and just sort of go along with things. Because a lot of photography it's not always just about what camera, what lens, what lighting and everything like that. Often it's coaxing people into stuff as well, isn't it? Because 9 people out of 10 are going to say, first thing they're going to say to you is, "Oh, I hate having my picture taken." And you think, well, yeah, I hear that every day. But then it's a case of chatting with people and getting friendly and finding a way to relax them and get a good picture. And obviously with the band, you can't do that with each individual and kind of work through them. So you've got to have just a bit of rapport and a joke and a laugh. But some people will go a bit quiet.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that's what it was, but, you know, probably years down the line, they probably had so many millions of photographs and videos done of them that water off a duck's back. But we're talking about the earlier days, aren't we? So,
yeah, Greg, Nick, and poor old Stu, who's no longer with us, I must add. He passed away a couple of years.
Oh, okay. Sorry to hear that.
It's a sad day. But they don't strike me as all as people who would even probably like to participate in photography sessions. They do so just as a matter of necessary, out of it being a necessary evil. You have to do this, so let's just turn up and have a couple of tins of lager and just make the most of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. You don't want people to drink too much, because I always remember photographing this guy who was a company director of this big company and he had me waiting there for ages to photograph him, and he'd obviously been out on a long liquid lunch, and he came in and his face was bright red and his eyes were all glazed over, and I thought, what are you going to do? You know,
nothing there,
take the picture from a distance is what I did.
Can't polish a turd, as they say.
Yeah. Well, you can now with Photoshop, but that was kind of a bit,
Yeah, I should say.
All you can do is kind of, with the redness, is sort of tone down your saturation and that on the old, when we were shooting it on negatives and stuff like that. But
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
If you had your time over again, given some of the feedback that I've given you here, do you think you'd pursue some of these black metal band shoots a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more that I could have done, because all the shoots we did were always studio shoots. Partly because that was kind of my comfort zone of doing it in a studio, because I could control the lighting and the backgrounds, and it was kind of an easier. You've got a captive audience; people aren't going to disappear off. But years later, I did end up doing a lot more sort of outdoor photography and like portraits of people and all sorts of things. But then again, if we'd have done it that way, would we have ended up with outside pictures that would have been similar to these other bands that you've talked about? Maybe doing it in the studio worked to our advantage to do something different.
Yeah, your image has captured an epoch. There's no doubt about that. And from here, look, you may be, once this goes out there, you may be contacted by some bands who want to do something similar, because there's a real vibe out there around this era. And
right.
Young, well, not even young fans, young and old. It's anybody who's into it who's a bit like me, who appreciates the era for its originality and its vibrance and its relevance to our youth as well, and bringing out that element, if you like, into the present. So if fans were to reach out to you now and want to recreate some of these iconic images, not exactly, but the way that you photographed them back then, is that something you'd be keen to do?
Maybe. I don't have that studio anymore though, but
yeah,
there's always a way, isn't there? But never say never.
What's the majority?
Because I actually,
you go. Sorry,
I was just going to say I packed in the photographic studio, because the thing is, I was saying to you that we shot everything on film, didn't we? And I had a black and white printing lab, and then later a color printing lab. So I processed and printed everything myself. And of course, when we kind of moved over to digital, I loved it, and I loved Photoshop and all that kind of thing. But the problem is, it made everybody was a photographer. You didn't need to have a studio and all of that stuff to go with it to be a photographer.
And these things as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, I do the same, and you even see people like at weddings shooting all the photographs on a phone, and everyone's a photographer. So I actually packed it in and started working from home for a few years. But now I sold the entire business, all my equipment, everything. It's easy enough to kind of go back into it, because I don't think you ever forget, do you?
But your bike, yeah.
I wouldn't want to go back to photographing weddings and things like that anymore. I've kind of done that. But bands would still interest me, doing anything like that. And my son is a keen videographer, and he recently did a video of my project, Station 27.
There you go.
Which you might want to check out. And we've got a video which is on YouTube of a song called The Call, which we shot locally, because we've got a fantastic place. Because my singer's dad has got a lease on this old US radar station.
Okay.
Just outside Ipswich, and it's all kind of derelict on the outside. Perfect. And we used that for the video. So that's you could use that for photo shoots as well, and you'd be recreating a similar sort of vibe.
Yeah, great sounding band, by the way. I like what you guys are doing at Station 27. Of
Thank
course,
you.
I went along, and that's how I found you. Actually, was the fact that you've got a presence there with the band, and that's how I was able to email you.
Well, I've got to I've got to try and advertise it, haven't I? I mean, it's not like you're paying me to do this.
Yeah, no, go for it. It's all right. Look, you're entitled to do
So
that.
we don't, to be honest, we don't actually gig or anything because I kind of packed up a few years ago because we did reform our old band Annihilated in the late sort of 2008 to 2013 sort of time, and we did a couple more albums and played some festivals in Germany and Norway and France and stuff like that.
Yep.
But now I just sort of go on my own and I bring in people from other bands. So I'll have to tap Dani up, really, won't I, if I see him? Because I bring in singers from other bands,
Absolutely.
like Oblivion and Chemical and Killer Corp, who are all brilliant local bands. And also I've got some friends abroad who will do guitar solos, and a guy from a band in France called Barabbas, a doom band, and he sang on one of the songs on one of my albums as well. So we get all sorts of people. So if I can find Dani...
There you go. Yeah. And
there you go. You never know, do you?
Well, look, you do never know. Well, the thing is, maybe they owe you a bit of a favour too, given you were so nice about giving them the photographs.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah. Well, like I said, when I bumped into him a few years ago at a gig, at least he did remember me, because I thought he's had hundreds of people photograph him since then. He probably wouldn't remember me, but he came up and said hello and that, and shows what a good guy he is.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So, well, this has been a fascinating chat, really. I do appreciate it. A lot of people out there, you'll see that when you see the YouTube video, that the fans, the old school fans, they love this. They love getting in behind the scenes and having a chat with someone who was there, who was crafting the image, because we're all so innocent back then too, weren't we? It was all happening in the moment. It was inspired because of youthful vigor and interest in the dark arts and heavy metal, and Cradle of Filth, especially across the English-speaking world. So us here in Australia, the United States, obviously, and in the UK, was such a big deal back then. They really were Iron Maiden's second coming, and that was what gave. Yeah. That's another thing. The music, apart from the imagery, the music just stood out so much, principally because of Stuart's guitar playing and those leads that he was adding that just sounded so. They were like Adrian Smith taken to a logical conclusion if it's in an extreme metal band. That was Stuart's gift to the world, if you like, and it spawned a ton of other bands, as you know. But this was also at an era, if you recall, where heavy metal was, well, the biggest metal band in the world, Metallica, was no longer a metal band. They still really aren't. They're more of a rock band. It was when they reneged on what the name was, and really it was down to the extreme metal bands to fly the flag. And thank God for Cradle and a lot of the Swedish and the Norwegian bands as well through that era there. And for people of my vintage and the length of time I've been into music, it's such a special era, and you have a role in it. So there you go. Yeah,
brilliant. And who knew at the time, At the time, you're just doing some pictures as a favour for a local band. And like I said, at the time, I'm sure I did say to them, well, when you become famous, you can start paying me. And there we go, and good luck to them all. They've done well. The boys done good.
Yeah. Have you got any photographs or negatives on file from that era?
I might have something in the loft, but I don't think I've got anything much, because at the time it didn't really mean that much to me. And obviously we used to have a policy of like every 5 and 10 years of clearing out negatives, because we had so many thousands and thousands of negatives.
Oh wow, yeah.
So things would have sort of got, I mean, some of it, they might have even had some of it themselves. I might have even given some of them to them themselves. I honestly don't remember. All I've got, because I'll be totally honest, I did have the first 2 demos, because obviously they gave them to me, and they gave me the albums that I did pictures on as well. They'd drop them into my studio, which was very good, and it was nice to see and all that. But quite a few years back, I got rid of those first 2 demos because I had somebody offer me a huge amount of money.
Yeah, they're worth a fortune. You're
Much
right.
more than I ever got for taking the pictures.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I sold them.
I've spoken to a few of the collectors. There's one guy in Scandinavia that just knows way more than I do about the technical aspect of when things were done and how things were released. And he's got stage outfits from back in those days and everything. And
really,
very much a collector. Yeah, and there are other people that are paying. It's a couple of grand in some instances, a few $1,000s, a few £1,000 or
right?
That people are. Yeah, there's
I didn't get
obvious out there. Yeah.
Take a naught off.
Yeah. Well, some of it, I should say, some of that stuff's available for sale at that rate. I don't know whether it'll sell or not. It's a bit like someone with an old Escort or something like that they clean, the old RS Escorts, that is in mint condition and they want 80 or 90 grand or even more these days for those sorts of cars.
No, you're right. Yeah.
And
just because somebody's got it for sale at that price doesn't mean anybody's going to buy it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
with our old Annihilated albums, we were one of the first sort of UK thrash metal bands, and so we did an EP and stuff like that, various things. But our first proper album wasn't until 1986. But you see that pop up on eBay for like £100 or something like that. But it doesn't mean anybody's actually going to buy it. I wouldn't.
Well, there you go. Yeah, but somebody out there is a collector, and if it's the final piece of the puzzle, they buy it because it might not ever come up again, or it might get damaged or what have you. And God knows, in the past, I've spent never more than a couple of hundred or what have you. But I was on Iron Maiden stuff. I was a massive Iron Maiden enthusiast.
Yeah.
And I bought some stuff, and then there was a proliferation of it all, and it was really hard to tell whether it was original or reprint or repress or whatever it might be, and started to lose a bit of its value as a collector post about, say, 2005-06, when eBay really became the behemoth that it's not. Well, I don't know. There are so many marketplaces these days, you don't know. But back in the day, remember when eBay was the thing 20 years ago, and you'd see these old T-shirts, Annihilated T-shirts or CDs, and you think, well, I'd better get that because it won't come up again. And then,
you just don't know, do you? But, you know, obviously I'd had these tapes for years and years. I never listened to them. I just kept them for sort of nostalgia, and they've been sitting in a cupboard sort of pretty much unplayed. And, so got rid of them. But, there's plenty of things out there. I mean, they did well, didn't they? And, it's nice. It's interesting, though, after all these years to do this, and to find out what real fans actually thought about those photographs, because I'd never considered that. I'd never kind of thought about any of this until you've kind of brought it to my attention.
Yeah, because I get the messages, so I know this. There's a lot of people, and they're young too, whose interest in the band stops not long after your involvement in the band by coincidence.
Right.
But I'm talking 1998, 1999. And I remember the moment I tuned out. It was when the album Midian came out. I listened to it a couple of times, and I knew that the sound that I loved was gone. It was no longer there because Stuart was no longer in the band. And
hang on. Cat seems to be right on top of me now.
The tree. There you go. Yeah.
Where's she going?
Up the back there.
God. That's right. You stand over it. Stand on it.
There you go. She's playing music now. Yeah.
I don't know. With some people, they have children coming in ruining their interviews. I've got animals. I should have shut the door, shouldn't I?
Look, honestly, I've got both. So there's no dramas from my perspective, that's for sure. And but what I was saying was that there's that epoch in the band's history is actually really important. Like I've said a couple of times, and with your images too, they're there for good now. They're there. That's what.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing to think, really, because we did it, and you try and do a really good image, and you think, yeah, that's great, and then you move on, and it's like all these years later, it's really nice to hear that people enjoyed that.
Yeah, it gives people a lot of happiness, and I think you should know that. It makes people, it gives people a connection to their past, and new people coming through. It gives them the band is very, very different these days. It virtually isn't the same band at all. It's just Dani with a cast of revolving door of musicians who just seem to change every album. And you know what? Fair play to Dani. He's managed to keep the band going, and so be it. And what have you? But you know, for people like me who were Iron Maiden fans, and then you hear a band like Cradle of Filth, and then there's an associated imagery. You think it's a second coming, and you've had very strong feelings about that era. So I'm grateful I can give you that feedback, and hopefully you can read the comments on YouTube and wherever else they may be, and you get some sense of appreciation for your contribution to that era. Yours and Nigel's and Chris's is just so very important.
Brilliant. Right. Yeah. No, I really appreciate that.
And look, if you do in your hunting over, however long it might be, if you come across an old image and you want to share it, please, that'd be fantastic. Yeah,
I don't think there's probably nothing that isn't already out there, I don't suppose, because like I say, it's not like the digital age where you take 200 images on a session. Yep. We probably would have taken 15 to 30.
Yeah.
And that would have been it, and we would have gone through and picked out the best few. Yeah. And that's it. You wouldn't have 50 fantastic different images from a session. Just wasn't really like that. It wasn't like spending days. It would have been an hour and a half in an evening after I'd finished work, because usually it was kind of outside of hours because people were working or whatever,
Yeah. Have you got one easily accessible? Have you got an old image of the band, even if it is out there? Is there one that you could send through to me at all?
I haven't got anything that's easily accessible. Nah.
That's fine. I can always attribute. Well, you clearly took the photograph, so I'm using it in the.
I think most things had my name on them, and my name being a bit of an unusual surname,
A French surname, right?
So I get my passport out and show you that I Beuchet, yeah.
Oh well, the French held the English court for hundreds of years there, didn't they? So the French.
It's French, yeah. And I got a great granddad, I think, who was born in Paris in 1860. So this guy I said about, who's the singer in Barabbas, in Paris, his surname is Beuchet, spelt the same. So he contacted me just like to say we could be cousins, and then it turned out we're both in bands. So I got him to sing on one of my songs.
Great stuff. Yeah, there's that connection.
As you do,
Yeah.
Which is kind of almost a bit Cradle of Filthish in a way, only in the title, because it's called Bloody God. Obviously, that's his, he titled it as that, maybe in English.
Is it already out there? When's it coming out?
No, that one's already out. That was a few years ago. It's on an album called Dark Passenger.
Okay, gotcha.
Which is what this is. T-shirt is from Dark Passenger. So I've done 3 solo albums like that, and I'm working on the 4th now.
Okay, good on
you. Yeah, and it's just, give it a listen, please, anybody. We don't advertise it. We don't do gigs. We don't push it. We do it because we enjoy doing it.
I'll put some links. I'll put some links into the description as well. Anyway, so you can easily come and check the YouTube page out.
That would be great, because it's all on Spotify and stuff like that. Anyway, you can find all the albums on there. But not to be confused with different spellings of Station 27. It's written with the figure, the number at the end, like
the numeral,
like that.
Yeah.
But that would be brilliant. Yeah.
Consider it done. Yeah. So look, I've had a very busy week this week with conference. They tend to come in waves. I've got Alice Cooper's daughter tomorrow, of all people. So I've got her.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I had Bill Steer last night from Carcass. You probably know who Carcass is, great British band.
Yeah.
Who else did I have? I had this morning I had Matt Pike from Sleep and High on Fire as well. So it's just been a heck of a week this week. It's been a bumper week, I've got to say.
Wow.
I just love doing this and having these types of conversations, and I've been doing it about 8 years.
And then you have Alice Cooper's daughter, and then you have an unknown photographer from Felixstowe.
Well, not so unknown, it turns out. So there you go. If a bloke in Brisbane or Gold Coast, I should say, knows who you are, mate, you're not so hidden.
That's something, isn't it? Yeah, be my claim to fame. Yeah.
There you go. Thanks very much for the chat. God bless, and I'll send you the links in the next few days.
Brilliant. Okay, cheers then.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Thanks.
Cheers. Catch up.
See ya.
What a great bloke. It was quite a mission to find him, so I'm very grateful that he accepted the opportunity. And there you go, another very worthy instalment for the Chronicles of Filth. I know you're not new to this because if you've listened this far, you know what I'm all about, which is having conversations with members and people who are very important to what the group is all about throughout the 1990s. There's a few others. James McIlroy, Lindsay Schoolcraft. Yes, I formed friendships with some other people, but really I'm all about the 1990s, and you can check them all out over at scarsandguitars.com. There's a tab up the top of the website, Chronicles of Filth. They're all there. Maybe there's one or two there that you've yet to check out, and you're interested. God knows I get many messages a week expressing how much people are enjoying them, and I really appreciate it, I must say. All right, that's it from me. My name's Andrew Beuchet-Smith, and I am the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast. Until the next one, it's a very goodbye for now.